Star Wars fans, we are just 1 month away from the exciting release of Set 2, Shadows of the Galaxy, which is going to bring so many incredible new cards and strategies to our favorite game from a galaxy far, far away. But that means there are still about 4 weeks of our regular locals to play. So today, in what might be our last deck profile for the Set 1 metagame, I'm going to show you what has been, I think, my favorite, most fun deck to play. I don't know if it is quite store champion quality, but I'm going to tell you this. This deck is better than you think. I'm going to show you my red Hera deck profile, so let's jump into it. What's up everyone, it's Dan with Main Deck. Welcome back to another Star Wars Unlimited deck profile, and like I said in the intro, this time we're going to go over what I think is one of the most fun decks to play, at least the one I like the most. This deck is one I've been toying with for a long time until I finally got to this build in particular, and that is Hera Syndulla under the red aspect in this case. If you've been watching a lot of my deck profiles, you probably already know I'm a huge fan of Red's discard package, and I find that it complements Hera's playstyle really well here after trying a few different versions of Hera. So before we get too far, let's start by looking at our leader, Hera Syndulla. Hera Syndulla is a command leader with the very simple ability of we're going to ignore the aspect penalty on Spectre cards you play. So if this happens to be this is maybe your first exposure to Star Wars Unlimited or something, or maybe you just know the basic rules and you see this deck list and you're like, why are there yellow and blue cards in your green-red deck? Well, the reason is Hera lets us ignore the aspect penalty as long as the cards have the Spectre trait on them. So that's why we get to include Ezra Bridger, Kanan Jarrus, and the Ghost and the Spark of Rebellion card down here. And really, okay, so this is an interesting ability. It doesn't really give you any raw value. It just changes what kind of cards you can play in your deck. But I do think there's something that gets a little bit underrated here in the fact that you can combine really key cards like Spark of Rebellion with 2 different sets of other cards. You normally don't get to do that without paying a penalty. So in this case, the real reason I like this build is we are leveraging the power of having Spark of Rebellion and the red discard package. Same kind of thing I was showing you in my red Han deck, but we also get to play the ramp from Resupply and the end game from Ewing Reinforcement. It's that combination of getting all of those, which is what I think lends this particular version of Hera to have, I think, a little bit more play against a wider variety of decks than some of the other ones. I know the blue Hera deck is pretty cool, and I like that one against the aggressive metagame. I like this deck a little more for being able to hit those mid-range control decks a little bit harder than you normally can as well. So without any further ado, let's finish our leader here and then get into the rest of the deck profile. Hera now flips at a turn 5, a 6 resource flip, but we are going to be trying to make that turn 4 as much as possible with that resupply. When she flips, she is a 4/6. You get to, of course, still continue ignoring aspect penalties of the Spectre cards you play, but then she has what I think is a very underrated ability. This on attack, you may put an experience counter on another unique unit. So, of course, this deck is packed with unique units in here. We want to have lots of targets for Hera to be able to pump up, and this makes her sort of a kill-on-sight target, a lot like Gideon Hask is in those blue villainy decks, like our Krennic profile that we showed. Your opponent just can't let Hera sit out there because your units just get a little too out of control over time, but she's actually pretty obnoxious to take down as well. Now, 6 is a kind of a late flip, but I do think if she were a 5 flip, you guys would be maybe starting to complain a little bit about her being powerful. I think it's honestly warranted given how she plays in here. And we have some cool cards in here that allow us to actually take some nice advantage of it as well. We are playing the Catacombs of Kadera as our base, so we're not playing Tarkin Town in this case. We're going for the 30 HP base, and that's because, well, we're trying to play a control game, and we aren't playing blue, so we really just need a little bit of a health buffer. This is a deck, when we're trying to play a little later game like we are with this Hera deck, we need to let ourselves get to that stage of the game. Now, once she gets there, dropping things like Home 1 and giant Ewing reinforcement turns and having recovery she can set up from Kanan Jarrus, for example, she can get back into the game, but the problem is just getting there. So I like the 30 health base a lot in here. I've definitely been preferring that one. And of course, we choose Catacombs of Kadera over Kestro City because it's just a little more rebel aligned, right? It's a little theme there. It doesn't matter, but it matters to me. All right, so going into our units, let's start with the ground units here. Some of this is going to be pretty straightforward. Spectre units are the name of the game here, and they work really well together. So Sabine Wren, of course, 3 of, one of the best 2-drops in the game, ability to deal 3 damage to a target, so she can attack for 3. She still has that 3 health as well, but then she has a really cool ability where on attack, you can also just deal that 1 damage to the base if you don't need the extra damage, and sometimes she's hard to attack, which is actually pretty cool when you can put the experience counters on here with Hera, so not bad at all. Good target to grab with Ewing reinforcement with one of our 5-drops, just good to have. Mon Mothma in here as a 2 of. I like this amount of Mon Mothma. I've experimented with a few different, I've done 0, I've done 3. This 2 has felt really good. She's not really like what you want early in the game, because what you're trying to do with this game is get to that late game. You need to put out your units early that can just attack your opponent's units and do something. Mon Mothma doesn't really do that. But when you get into that late game, Mon Mothma is such a cool hit off of Ewing reinforcement, because you're going to be able to essentially see 15 cards deep to try and find home 1. Or sometimes Ghost, occasionally Ghost, but really often you're looking specifically for home 1, so you can really get control of that game, get your turnabout on, make the opponent, close the door on the opponent effectively. And I love finding Mon Mothma and then, you know, either another 3 and a 2-drop or a 5-drop or something with that Ewing, because then you get to dig for another home 1. All too often I find a home 1 on the Ewing reinforcement. Like, oh, that's not very helpful. But Mon Mothma can let you find another one there. So I like her in there. And if you have to drop her early on, just to kind of find, you know, maybe smooth out your play line a little bit, smooth out your curve, so that you're able to hit some of these rebels that you need to hit on turn 3, 4 to be able to again keep attacking your opponent's units and dealing with them. Yeah, she's okay for that too. Admiral Akbar at a 3 of here. This is one card I've often seen people dropping, but Admiral Akbar dropping down in count. I don't think I see a lot of these decks running 0 of him, but they drop him down in count, and that to me is wild, because Admiral Akbar, out of maybe all of the units in the deck, is the one I'm most excited to be able to play, even if I already have one in play, because he is still going to get that when played trigger to deal damage to something, and often if you have an Admiral Akbar out, you might already have a few things on the board because you played him earlier, so playing this new one is also going to do a bunch of damage. Yeah, I mean, look, does he have a lot of power on his own? Not really, but he does have a Restore 1, which is kind of nice, and that 4 health is honestly kind of annoying sometimes for the opponent to get through, where he's going to be able to deal usually a couple damage on his own, and his one play trigger is going to deal something like 2 or 3 or 4 damage and take something out. It's a great way to finish off a leader that ran itself into Hera just to deal with Hera. He does work, and with Bright Hope in here, you can always bounce him and replay him. He's a good grinder. He's going to get you to that stage of the game that you're trying to get to. Ezra Bridger, I'm always so hit or miss on. He sometimes does nothing. He sometimes does everything. He's super swingy like that, I guess, in how effective he is. A little bit volatile. But the big thing about Ezra in here is he has the Force trait, definitely slapping in 3 because of that Force trait, because we are running Force Throw. And we need that Force Throw to be online. It is so strong when it gets to deal damage to stuff as well. So, you know, we like Ezra. He's fine. He's got good stats for his cost. He sometimes gets you free cards, which is really cool. He can be grabbed with home 1 just to put that Force back into play, to turn on Force Throws, or to be able to grind out the game and get a little more advantage with him. Yeah, he's pretty cool. Echo-based Defender, guess what? It's a 4/3 Sentinel. It's going to block attacks. Home 1 can replay it. It's got a job to do. He's got a job to do, and he's going to do his job. It ain't much, but it's honest work with Echo-based Defender. So, you run him. Kanan Jarrus leading off our ground 4-drops here. Kanan, I feel like he's been underrated so many times. This is a card where it feels like getting to splash in this color into whatever else you're playing is usually worth it. Now, a little awkward when you get that resupply at turn 2, and it's like, you don't quite want to drop Kanan, except it's not in red, because Kanan and Force Throw, when your hand is like resupply, Kanan, Force Throw, oh, you're living a good life at that point, because you could resupply turn 2, and then turn 3, you have 5 resources, drop Kanan, and then immediately Force Throw your opponent, make them lose a card, and deal damage to something. Oh, it feels really good, really rude. And that 5 health, annoying to get through. That on attack is usually going to heal some stuff. It's going to mill the opponent some too. Not really a big deal. I mean, sometimes this deck can grind a little bit and that like actually becomes something kind of cool. But you know, usually at best you'll just like psychologically impact your opponent, where they'll see see a Darth Vader and go, oh no, you got my Darth Vader. It's random cards. I mean, there could be another Darth Vader just waiting in there. Could be something even better than a Darth Vader in there. So yeah, I mean, whatever. The mill doesn't really matter, but the healing, the restore matters, and the mill occasionally can get there when the game grinds a lot, which it can against other control decks. Zeb Aurelios. Zeb is really good in really particular board states. The biggest issue is that he is a kill on sight target. He doesn't do anything when you play him immediately, but we still have him 3 of in here, and that is because we are running 2 copies of Frontline Shuttle, and this is, I think, one of the combos that people don't always see coming that is extremely strong. Ewing Reinforcement into Zeb plus Frontline Shuttle often represents the opponent's not going to quite realize it, or it's going to be a little later in the turn. They're not going to be able to react to it, but then you can pop that Frontline Shuttle to attack with Zeb while he's exhausted, and then use his when he completes an attack trigger to deal with something else on the board. It's one of those plays that just like suddenly turns the game around when the opponent didn't quite see it coming. Frontline Shuttle actually doing work in this deck. I really enjoy it. It's a nice little 2-of, little cheeky card. But yeah, Zeb is one of the reasons why that's quite good. Also, Zeb and Hera, great, because Hera can put experience counters on him, and Ghost can put shields on him, and those are the things he needs, because he needs to complete the attack. It means he can't die in the attack. He has to be alive afterwards to deal this 4 damage to something else. So all these ways that you can put stuff on him to make sure he lives through, essential to really making Zeb do work. And then when he does work, he really is going to clear some stuff off the board. We have 2 copies of Agent Callus, another card where I'm looking in set 2 for things to replace him. I'm not super pleased with him because that 5-drop 4/4, it's just not quite there for stats with that ambush. Like, that ambush is good, and he's in here basically because, yeah, I want an ambush target off of Ewing Reinforcements sometimes. Sometimes I just need to have that action. I deal with something on the board, which is where Agent Callus and then the Mace Windu as well are sometimes just the play. That is not all he does, of course, though. He does get to draw cards sometimes when another unique unit's defeated. He doesn't usually last long. He often dies in the exchange, but if he hits a unique unit, you do get to draw a card off of it too, which is pretty cool. We're going into a game that's trying to go late and wants resources. That's where Ezra is useful. That's where Agent Callus can be useful too, and that's where Bright Hope can be useful. A number of ways of just kind of getting more cards in your hand, plus the Forced Surrender, which we'll talk about in a moment. So, you know, he kind of does that, but the problem with Agent Callus, he's a little of one thing and a little of another. He's not just exceptionally good at that one thing that he does. That said, you know, you can also put experience counters on him with Hera. He's a unique unit, so maybe you can make him last a little longer and draw cards. It's not just when he does the attack, it's whenever any unique unit is defeated, you get to draw cards. So there are plenty of opportunities in this deck to trigger this, even attacking in with like your own like smaller unique unit, like a trading with a Sabine Wren into something else, then that can trigger that draw card. So yeah, I mean, he's all right. He's all right. I think he gets a little bit of a bad rap. People call him like unplayable. I think he's playable. I don't think he's great, but I think he's playable. Mace Windu, I think, we've talked about this in other profiles we've done too. Mace Windu is a champion. This man does so much work. I love him so much. And he's another Force unit, making our 3rd Force unit in the decks. We got Ezra, Kanan, and Mace Windu to give you options to trigger that Force throw. I'm looking forward to having more still to be a little more consistent with it. But for now, I mean, I'm not going to scoff at this guy. 5/7 ambush when he attacks and defeats a unit. You ready him. A lot of the time you're going to attack with him, be able to ready him, and you can directly attack the opponent's face afterwards as well, which is going to bring a lot of damage they weren't expecting. But in this control deck, that's not always the play. We're really looking to go attack, defeat something, and then attack and defeat something else, which, I mean, that's what more can you ask for your 7 resources than to take out 2 threats of your choice in the ground arena? Pretty solid. And then otherwise he can just be a big old beat stick. And I mean, I've had plays with Mace where I've taken out 3 things too. I mean, he's the man certainly does work. So we like him at the top end in this deck. Frontline Shuttle leading off our space units. This is not a space unit that you really want to play into space. Honestly, if you see this in your opening hand, I don't look at your opening hand and go, oh, I have Frontline Shuttle. Cool, I have a turn 1 play. I don't even know if it's worth playing turn 1. I would often mulligan that hand if you're not finding something a little better, like a Spark of Rebellion, or unless that hand is like really sweet and there's like Resupply and some of the other good stuff that you're really trying to mulligan aggressively for. it's just not going to do a lot in the early game. It's a 1/3. It's just gonna, if their opponent wants to kill it, they'll just kill it with whatever, and it won't do much back. And if they don't want to kill it, then it's just gonna put you down potentially a useful card until like way later in the game when you have something that you actually want to attack a second time with. That said, late in the game is where this thing shines, again off of Ewing Reinforcement. Frontline Shuttle and Zeb is a sweet play. Frontline Shuttle and Kanan, little underrated, a way to kill something potentially and get some extra healing off. Really cool. Frontline Shuttle and Hera is the one thing I really want to point out, because that does some pretty wild stuff. Popping Frontline Shuttle to get an attack off with your Hera. I've done this when my Hera has been no good to me deaded, so she was exhausted, couldn't ready. My opponent was like, oh, got rid of her, not really a big deal. I play Frontline Shuttle, and then the next action, pop Frontline Shuttle, attack with that Hera, get the counter on some other unique unit that needs it, and suddenly the opponent is getting attacked by the thing they thought they took out of the game. So very cool stuff with that. Also worth mentioning, Frontline Shuttle and Ghost, nice little combo to get extra shields on things too. I'll talk about Ghost in just a moment. The card is quite a powerhouse also. But yeah, Frontline Shuttle, it's a good 2-up. It does work. We just don't want to see it that often, but when you want to see it, you're going to find it with like Ewing, and then it's going to be pretty exciting. Bright Hope. This is basically, we're hinging all of our hopes in space on Bright Hope. We don't want to lose to space, and we just have Bright Hope and basically only Bright Hope to make sure that happens. That said, in Hera, Bright Hope can get kind of big. Bright Hope is able to get to be a 3/7 or a 4/8 in games where it's going to chomp through a lot of your opponent's space units before they finally deal with it, usually buying you plenty of time to be able to get to that kind of like Ghost or Home 1 stage where you can fight them back a little bit. So feel like it does its job super well. Not to mention the fact that there are a lot of units this can bounce back and get some value with. Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar, both excellent ones. Agent Callus is another card that can be bounced with Bright Hope to get that ambush again if you happen to live. Or Mace Windu. You can also bounce Windu back, which is pretty cool too. So yeah, I don't mind any of that. And I've also found in, one of the matches that I get to face a lot locally is Palpatine, because we've got a player who really, really loves playing Palpatine, and I've got to experience all ends of that matchup. And I have found Bright Hope to be kind of a cheeky thing when the opponent goes to set up damage on something to steal with Palpatine. You go, no, actually, I'm just going to take that back. And no, sorry, you gotta sacrifice something else now to be able to steal it, which is cool. I like any edge I can take against that heavy control Palpatine deck. So yeah, Bright Hope's sick. Now the Ghost. The Ghost is another one of these cards that is worth Hera's ability to be able to play in here, because we get to play it with that access to ramp and with the access to the discard that's going to allow us to get to the stage of the game where the opponent doesn't have as many resources, and we are constantly shielding everything. One of the most key matchups of this is actually Palpatine, where you can get into these board states with Hera, the Ghost, and any other Spectre, but ideally something like Kanan in play. If you can set this game up, ideally kind of just running your opponent out of the really good cards that they need using some of your discard abilities, you get to that stage where their Palpatine ability obviously can't work on Hera because she's a leader. The Ghost, it has a shield, and the Ghost has a shield that it put on your other Spectre unit. You get to attack the opponent's face or just clear their board with stuff, and they try to deal damage to things, and it only pops shields, and then the Ghost gets to shield them again. It just puts the opponent where it's going to take that Palpatine player like a couple of turns or a really, really good draw to be able to really pull through and start to be able to even put the damage on stuff to flip Palpatine and capture it. And those turns are exactly what you're trying to find in that deck, where you can put the pressure on and then just close the game on them at that point. So Ghost, really good for stuff like that. I can't say enough good things, honestly, about this 5 for 6 that's shielded, and when played and on attack, it puts shields on your other Spectres. It just makes them have so much more value. That's where Sabine, Ezra, Kanan, Zeb are all just like doing work, not to mention shielding Hera herself is just powerful. Like anything that just says you can just shield your leader when you play this, plus it's a giant shielded body also, that feels worth playing, and especially when we get to do that faster with that resupply. So love it. Love the Ghost. Super good. Why is it only a 2-of? It is a little awkward with Ewing reinforcements. We have a lot of high-end stuff already. I could see totally doing 3 of it, honestly, if you want to tweak this build a little bit. Putting in a 3rd ghost, not a bad choice. The ghost is really good, but we don't have 1-drops in here, so off of Ewing reinforcement, it's like, it's not really what we want to see. We'd rather see some other combinations of things, so it's just not, I don't know, but I think 3 would be fine too. I don't hate that at all. Home 1. Close the game. That's what this card does. That's what it says. Should just say printed right on it. Closes the game. 8 costs 7/7. Restore 2. Each other friendly unit gets restore 1. So you're going to take some damage. You are going to take damage, but you're just going to heal it all back up. When played, play a heroism unit from your discard pile. It costs 3 less. Note this doesn't only play 3 cost units. A lot of people get really stuck on that. This can play Kanan when you're at 9 resources. This can play Zeb when you're at 10. This can play Mace Windu out of there when you have the 12 resources, and I have gotten to that stage, and that is really strong. A really powerful play to do too, because then you get the ambush, you get the restore 1 right away from that too. Oh, it's so sweet. It's so sweet. Home 1, by the way, another frontline shuttle target that you can think about just to get that restore 2 off of the frontline shuttle as well. Pretty cool. Just a lot of damage out of nowhere. Again, it can't hit bases, but it's for clearing frontline shuttles, for clearing board. Home 1 can clear almost anything in space. Biggest enemy of Home 1 is the Devastator, and we're just going to hope a lot of the time you're going to have cards like Spark of Rebellion that will get the Devastator out of their hand so that your Home 1 can land safely. And if it's not sparked, then Force Throw or Force Surrender should do the trick as well. But yeah, not a lot to say about this card other than it's how you close the game. If you don't have 3 Home 1s, you are going to have trouble closing the game a little bit more, which is the rough part about right now. I know the prices for Spark of Rebellion are just still ridiculous, and they're going to be ridiculous for a while. My hope is that when we get into Shadows of the Galaxy, we will have some more options to be able to swap in for things. But right now, I feel like for a late game control deck like this, you really want to have the Home 1s. If you don't, slap some reinforcement walkers in there. They'll still do some work. Still a good card, but just not quite the you are going to lose the game because there's nothing that's going to compete with this in space right now, and everything else is just healing you. And I just put an Echo-based Defender back in play as well. Home 1 does so much work. But another thing Home 1 does really well is get thrown at things. So Force Throw. Force Throw is such a powerful card in here. Obviously, you're going to use it to discard your opponent's hand a lot of the time. You have these games where you're playing Spark of Rebellions early, Force Throws in the mid to late game, Force Surrender in the late game. You're discarding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 cards out of your opponent's hand across a single game. And it all just adds up. It all adds up and works really well, especially when we have Ezra, Kanan, and Mace to turn the damage on from Force Throw. But don't be afraid, because your opponent's going to put down some big, scary leaders sometimes. And if you Force Throw them, they're just going to pitch some, like, shoot first or something that they were just holding on to. Force Throw yourself. Discard the Home 1, deal the 8 damage to your opponent's leader, and make sure you don't lose the game before you had a chance to even play the Home 1 anyway. That's one of the key uses of Force Throw as well. It is if you're willing to just discard a card from your hand and say 1 cost, kill almost anything in the game. Yeah, great card. Honestly, this and Force Surrender are really the reasons to play Red Hera over anything else. And I think they're good. I think they're good reasons too. Spark of Rebellion. I love this card. Probably my favorite card in Spark of Rebellion, which is very fitting given the name. But it's Thoughtseize for Magic. It is just discard a card from your opponent's hand. You get to choose the card. You are going to use this early in the game to hit their resupplies or their super laser techs to allow yourself to ramp faster than them. I find that to be an extremely effective play a lot of the time. You can use this late in the game or mid in the game to deal with your opponent's overwhelming barrage, to deal with their devastators, to deal with their fire sprays. Old habits die hard there. To deal with their fire sprays. Lots of things that are going to get into play and be problematic for you. Spark of Rebellion just says cost 2, it's gone. And I can't I couldn't like this card more than I currently do. It's so good. Yeah, it's just great. I think a lot of the time you're going to want to be mulliganing aggressively to find Spark of Rebellion against other ramp style decks and to find Resupply as well. Your ideal opening hand would have 1 Spark and 1 Resupply in almost every game except against aggro, and aggro rather than Spark, you'd rather have like a Sabine Wren and a Resupply. But the Resupply key just to get going faster. So I guess we're talking about Resupply now, but yeah, what does it do? It ramps you 1. Puts you up 1 more resource. That means your leader's flipping a turn earlier. That means your home 1's dropping a turn earlier. It means the whole game is going to be a turn faster for you. Ewing Reinforcement plays a turn earlier too. You have to give up an earlier turn, but that's the point of this, is that your late game turns are so much more powerful that it is worth giving up that early game turn. As long as you can live there, again, that's why we're playing the 30 HP base. We have 2 copies of Open Fire. Open Fire is just going to do some damage to something. It's going to help you control the board. It's going to do what you need to do. Use it on leaders to shore the damage up. They're going to attack your Hera. You're going to close the game, or you're going to finish them off with Open Fire. Forced Surrender. Another one of my favorite cards in here. Draw 2 and make your opponent discard 2. You have to damage their base. We have enough units in here where that's not too hard to be able to do, including from effects like Sabine Wren. There's a nice little thing there to remember, is that she can deal that damage to their base no matter what, even if there's a Sentinel in the way, so you can get that Forced Surrender to trigger. So that's really cool. Forced Surrender hits the opponent at just the right turn, especially with that Resupply, where you can usually dump the best cards out of their hand because they've gotten down on cards. And then it draws you 2 more cards to replace it, which is going to find you all that gas you need to close the game as well. So it does everything you really want it to do. Why is it only a 2 of? This is a pretty tight deck. There's just a lot of stuff I want to include in here, and I always have the 3rd Forced Surrender in the sideboard, because you don't need it against like aggro matchups at all. You're going to side it out every time against aggro, but against later game mid-range decks and control decks, you need 3 Forced Surrenders, so you're going to bring it in. Bring in the 3rd one in there to shore it up. But having 2 means you're still going to be able to see it game 1 against them at a pretty reasonable amount. So it's pretty nice 2 of in there, and saves a little bit of room for some of the other juicy things that we can like toolbox with our Ewing Reinforcement. And speaking of which, Ewing Reinforcement, what a powerful card. I can't believe they sandbagged this card until the very end of spoiler season, because this card is one of the defining cards of the Spark of Rebellion metagame. The Han decks, the green Han decks, rely on Ewing Reinforcement, and this deck relies on it too, as a way to just get the value in the late game that you lost to potentially ramping early on, or then when your opponent's just putting too many things out. Ewing Reinforcement has so many really powerful combos in here. Things like Sabine Wren, Mon Mothma, Admiral Akbar is a 7 total cost that puts 3 things on the board, one of which puts another card in your hand, and one of which then deals at least 3 damage to something in the ground arena, or often more, or it can also deal damage to things in the space arena if you've got that built up. You can also do things like Echo Base Defender, and then like a Kanan Jarrus, so the Echo Base is going to defend you from attacks that turn. Kanan's going to get to attack another thing next turn, and start to heal your base back up. Frontline Shuttle and Zeb, we talked about that already. Frontline Shuttle and Agent Callus. Agent Callus can kill something like with a Sentinel in play, and then the Frontline Shuttle can be popped to allow your Hera to attack something, a target you actually care about, and then put a counter on the Agent Callus or something. There's so many of these combos. Bright Hope Echo Base Defender, that's going to put a Sentinel in both arenas for you. So lots and lots of things to look forward to playing with Ewing Reinforcement. It pretty much always hits something good. Not to mention, it is just pay 7 for Mace Windu sometimes, which is the cost you would normally pay for Mace Windu. You're just going to look 10, you're like, oh, there's Mace Windu, perfect. That's the card I want. Then you play him down and then start to gain control of the game. So like I said, that's the deck list. You're going to play slow and steady, attack your opponent's units. Don't attack their base into the late game. You just don't need to, unless there's really nothing else to do. They already took initiative and you have stuff in play. I hit their base, I guess. But if you ever are attacking their base, that usually means you're in a pretty good position. Focus on their units, get to the late game, play Ewing Reinforcement, play Home 1, get your Ghost combos out, use your Mace Windu, use your Frontline Shuttle to do cool stuff, Bright Hope your Admiral Akbar, Force Throw your opponent's hand away, Force Surrender their hand away. You're gonna have a fun time. And your Hera's going to have so many good targets to put counters on to get stuff totally out of your opponent's control, and that is how you're going to win the game with this red Hera deck. Now, of course, not every deck you're just going to win the game against, so let's talk about some sideboard options that will help shore up some of these matchups for you just a little bit. Now, we have, as usual, we have just 5 options on the screen for you. And I always only put a few options there. This isn't a dedicated sideboard because I think you need to just look at what's being played locally. What do I need to shore up against? But these are some of the cards that I have included in my sideboard at different times. Bombing Run, you know, we have times when we have a lot of players who are just playing lots and lots and lots of go wide aggro decks, and bombing run just kills them all. It clears the board. It's really, really sick. Traitorous, especially sometimes we have Grand Moff Tarkin players who get really into stacking a bunch of experience counters on stuff. But also just against aggro, sometimes this does some pretty good work. They're going to put down as three costs is like pretty good units for them. Things like Fighters for Freedom, you like taking that from them is going to lose them something, and then you can run it into something else. So it can be a pretty valuable play to be able to do. So I like Traders sometimes against those aggro decks as well. If they're the really hyper go wide, you usually don't have as much time. You really just want to see bombing run, but hey, you know, it works as well. And you're going to be siding out things like Forced Surrender and Spark of Rebellion against those. So you're going to have a little bit of room. Put in the third Forced Surrender. I put this here. You have to put it in when you're playing against control mid-range. You just need to be able to see it against those matchups to get the resource advantage on them. K2SO, now this is kind of a fun one, but straight out of our Red Han profile, this is another discard source basically, and this of course is a unique unit too. So this, as a unique unit, the 4/4 Overwhelm can stack counters from Hera as well to get kind of out of control and hard to deal with. But really this is, again, against those mid-ranger control decks. You can just put this in getting rid of some of your early game stuff that you don't necessarily care as much about, just to have something late game that is another must-kill threat, but when they kill it, it's just going to make them lose another card out of their hand, which is pretty kind of gross actually. So a pretty cool card that you can sideboard if you want against those control matchups. And then finally, I don't hate the idea of putting one restock in the sideboard, because sometimes you play these like mono vigilance decks that are just looking to grind the game out, and that one restock, playing restock and then choosing to put the restock and 3 other cards back into your deck is how you're just not going to lose the game to mill. You're already going to be digging into your deck and playing a lot of stuff, so you're not necessarily helping yourself in that regard. So the restock does help kind of shore that up. Additionally, the restock is a way to get home ones back in your deck. Home ones and Mon Mothmas, to find them, really cool cards to restock so that you can really grind out against the opponent. If they keep answering your home ones, you just keep playing home ones until you can win the game. So yeah, I kind of like that as well. But some mix of those. There are other cheeky things you can do. There are like transformative sideboards where you can go into things like A-Wings to go a little faster. I've tried that a little bit. I'm not a huge fan of it. I like just sticking with what Hera I think is better at, which is playing units to the board, trading with your opponent's stuff, and going into the late game instead. She's pretty good at that. So I like to play a sideboard that works that way. But hey, you do whatever you want to do with it, and let me know if you like this deck. Let me know what you think in the comments below. If you give it a try in these few weeks before Shadows of the Galaxy, then I would love to hear your results. See, I have won locals with this. It is an effective deck. It is one that you can play and take games with, and I think you will really enjoy that if you do. Give it a try. In Shadows of the Galaxy, even though we haven't seen any Spectre stuff yet, I already have my eyes on a few cards that I think will really be nice for this. So I am definitely going to be trying an updated version of Shadows of the Galaxy as well, because I'm committed to Hera. I have a showcase. I am super, super big fan of Hera and this playstyle and this deck. I'm going to continue enjoying it for a long time. But hope you guys enjoyed this video for tonight. Thank you so much for watching. Let me know how it goes in the comments down below, and we will see you guys in the next one.